So today we're going to be talking about what's called function notation. It always freaks my students out. It never fails. Even my Algebra 2 students always get scared of what it's talking about. So we always read it as function of the input gives you the output or equals the output. So when you write this, the function, so they always use, or they don't always use, but you'll typically see the letter F, which stands for function. So of just is the parentheses of the input. So, and I'm going to use the highlighter because this is the biggest thing that always gets messed up. So it's function of the input equals, and then all of this part is the output, or what gives you the output. So 4x plus 4, that's how you find the output. Remember, we use the process column to help write this equation. So this part is going to give you the answer. Now, if you notice, they both use the letter X on both sides, and that's what always freaks everybody out, is that you have the X inside of the parentheses and you have the X right here. So it's telling you it's function of, and it's going to tell you what your input variable is, and then it's 4, the input variable plus 4. So if you see it, and you'll typically, whenever we are solving using these, you'll see something that says f of 10 equals. So if you see f of 10 equals, and it's telling you this is your function, it's telling you to use 10 as your input in this function. So it's function of 10, or function of the input, and it's telling you to use 10 as your input. So it'd be 4, change x to 10, plus 4. So if you look, the number or the variable inside of the parentheses is the number or variable you're going to use inside of that parentheses. So then you're going to do 4 times 10, which is 40, plus 4. 40 plus 4 is 44. So the function of 10 gives you 44 as the output. That's how you read it. So function of 10 gives you 44. So using 10 as your input means that your output is 44. Okay? Now, f of x equals 4, or f of x, or function of x, so we always, f of x, that's how you read it. So when you write coordinates from function notation. So if I said f of 10 equals 44. So I'm just taking this and writing it as a coordinate. So remember, this is our input. And you have to remember, okay, the input variable is always x, and then gives you the output, and the output is always y. So then you would write your answer as, so it's f of 10, which is input, so it'd be 10, comma, 44. Remember, it's always x, comma, y. Okay, now if I had, this is a new function, notice it's going to give you, identify a new function, so we'll say f of x again equals negative 6x plus 3. Then it's going to say something like find f of 2. Now notice this 2 is inside of the parentheses, so of course it's going to be, sorry, throwing stuff, it's going to be the input. So if this is using 2, then this is going to use 2. I very much suggest that you use a highlighter if you have problems. So highlight what it's wanting you to use as your input and change it in both places. So now I'm going to write it as f of 2, because I'm telling you that my input is 2, and then I'm going to say negative 6, my input is 2 as well, plus 3. Now, the reason I always put it in parentheses, if you don't, if you wrote it just as a 2, you would probably think that's a negative 62. But remember, negative 6 is multiplying by x. So you could write it like that. I just think that people get mixed up. So I always input it using a parentheses. So then it would be negative 6 times 2, which is negative 12, plus 3. Negative 12 plus 3 would be negative 9. Now, you have to write this f of 2 part again, so say f of 2 is equal to negative 9. Now, I'm going to ask a question, I just want you to think about it. Is the 2 the input or the negative 9 the input? So the 2 is the input, so again, this is x, this is y. Okay, now there's one more way, and this is kind of a new concept. Well, I mean, all of this should, I'm pretty sure, is new. But if I said use f of x equals negative 6x plus 3, and I told you to find when f of x was equal to some value. Now, what I mean by some value is instead of it giving you an output, it's giving you a value for this after you've used an input. So let's say we use 15. So it says f of x equals 15, and I'm wanting to find when f of x is equal to 15. So the difference here is instead of it using the number inside of the parentheses, it's using it as the output value. So you would write this as, so I'm going to take this and plug it in for f of x. All of it, not just the inside part, all of it, because notice it says f of x is equal to. So I'm going to take that out and use 15. So I'm going to say 15 equals, oops, sorry, the bell rang, negative 6x plus 3. Okay? Now, you guys have been solving for a while, so now circle your variable. The opposite of add 3 is subtract 3, and subtract 3. 15 minus 3 is 12, equals negative 6x. Okay, divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6, so x equals 12 divided by negative 6. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. 12 divided by 6 is 2. So x equals negative 2. So now I'm going to plug negative 2 in there, because again we have to write it as this since it's function notation. So I would say f of negative 2 equals 15. And that is your answer. Okay, so that's the big thing that you have to look for every time you're doing these. If it gives you a value inside of the parentheses, you're going to plug it in for x. If it gives you what f of x equals, then you're going to take out the f of x and write it as that number. and then solve for x.